Gisbergen is hoping to join the Cup Series in 2025, and Hailie Deegan may or may not be returning to AM Racing for the remainder of the 2024 season. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got to NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. We're first going to take a look at a couple paint schemes that have been revealed over the course of the last couple of days. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into them. The first paint scheme we're taking a look at is Bubba Wallace's 2024 McDonald's Jiu-Jitsu scheme that we're going to see this weekend at Chicago. I love this collaboration. This paint scheme looks amazing. It looks fantastic. Looks incredible. I'm looking forward to seeing the racetrack this weekend at the Chicago Street Course. And the only other paint scheme we're taking a look at is Blaine Perkins' 2024 Crocodile Cloth scheme that we'll see this weekend at the Chicago Street Course. I like the green. I like the partnership. I like the sponsorship. Really looks solid. Looks amazing. And I'm looking forward to see this car on the racetrack this weekend at the Chicago Street Course. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Lululemon. As it was announced on Thursday morning or Wednesday evening that Lululemon has signed its first ever licensing deal with NASCAR. I think t-shirts are going to be going for around $200 or something like that. That's what Adam Stern had reported. And this is, of course, a big company inside the Chicago area. It's a really great partnership. They're going to have some merchandise being sold at the Chicago Street Course weekend. I think some of that will be online as well for you to purchase. So really exciting. Really cool stuff, and I'm glad to see Lululemon has officially partnered with NASCAR. Really awesome stuff overall, to be honest with you. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Chicago Street Course purse money. Every time we have a NASCAR Cup, Xfinity Series, and Truck Series race, Bob Pockus puts out the purse money for that event. And according to Bob, for the Cup race, it's $7,978,831, and for the Xfinity race, it's $1,786,961. I would have thought more would have been out for Cup, to be honest, considering it's basically a full field for the weekend. Xfinity, same thing, because if I'm not mistaken, NASCAR is paying out these purses for this weekend since they're running the promotion for the event. It's some solid purse money for sure, but I feel like there could have definitely been at least a little bit more money for the teams, in my opinion. But the money is not that bad. It could definitely be worse, but it could definitely be better, to be honest with you. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Choose Zone for this weekend at the Chicago Street Course, as it was officially reportedly by Dustin Long that they have moved the Choose Zone from turn 9 to turn number 6. The teams and drivers had asked for this at Chicago so they could be a lot more prepared, because where they originally had it was turn number 9, and a lot of the cars had not been able to catch up on the restarts during the event, especially during the single file restarts. That's why they're doing the Choose Zone for this year, and they're changing it up. Obviously, double file restarts are going to be a thing this year, this time around, and we'll get to see some really interesting restarts for sure. Maybe some more wrecks, maybe some more spins. Who knows at this point, but the hope and prayer is that maybe we don't see a lot of crashes as well. We're going to have to wait and see how things play out and turn out in regards to this Choose Zone change that they are doing, but hopefully it can create some really solid and great racing on the restarts overall, to be honest with you. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about qualifying. As it was reported by Bob Pockus on Wednesday morning that in addition to there being an alternate line for this weekend at the Chicago Street Course, there's expected to be an alternate start-finish line for next weekend at Pocono, and then the week after that at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. The reason they're going to be having an alternate start-finish line is because there's an access road on turn number 1 and 2 for both of the racetracks. And what the hope is that you can get to that alternate start-finish line and come down pit road so you're not affecting the last, because they are bigger tracks. Remember, both of those tracks are 2.5 miles long. So they're hoping with this change that is going to be coming in that there's no issues and it basically cannot affect other drivers' qualifying laps, especially with single car qualifying being a thing, I believe, and they're going to be doing, I think, group qualifying for some of this series, but not for others as well. It's very interesting for sure to look at, and nonetheless, I think it's a great change to go ahead and do overall. I think it's a pretty solid change, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Fortnite. Now, it was reported by a pretty big name Fortnite leaker that there are plans to bring NASCAR elements into Fortnite. Remember, they're actually doing a big Rocket League thing or some Chicago Street Course thing for Fortnite, and according to reports, sounds like Rocket League could be also getting involved. I think Epic Games works really, really closely with Rocket League as well, and they're planning to bring some NASCAR elements. What I'm hoping is that we can bring some of the NASCAR cars into Fortnite. Obviously, Fortnite is one of the biggest games out there currently at the moment, and to see that they are looking to bring certain things in, I think is really exciting and really cool stuff, to be honest. It's just really exciting to see that Fortnite and NASCAR working together closer, it sounds like, and maybe in the not so distant future, we could see some more cooler things, maybe like a championship replica or something like that. I think that would be really exciting if that ended up happening. So we'll have to kind of wait and see what happens in regards to that, and we'll see what kind of goes down. But nonetheless, it's really exciting to see that it sounds like there will be some big plans for the Fortnite partnership going into the future. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Lindsay Brewer. As it was announced on Wednesday late afternoon that Lindsay Brewer is officially out at Juncos Hollinger Racing. Now, she's not been officially fired from Juncos Hollinger, but it sounds like more than likely she is done with Juncos Hollinger Racing. She has driven the number 76 car in the Indy NXT series. She has a very massive following on social media, especially on Instagram, but let's be real and frank and honest. I like Lindsay Brewer, but she has absolutely struggled in Indy NXT this year. I think she's only had like a couple top 10s altogether. I know the field is extremely stacked. When she moved up to Indy NXT with Juncos Hollinger, I was questioning a little bit based on the performance that she's had because the performance just has not been there for her. If you're not performing and you're not getting the results, you likely are going to get replaced by another driver who's probably more deserving and more talented. We wish her the best of luck. I do hope for her sake that things can turn around for her. She can get better on the track. But like I've already mentioned and said, it sounds like that she's all around just done with Juncos Hollinger. It sucks to see for her, but at the same token, at the same time, the performance has not been there. So I'm also not completely shocked or surprised by this news, to be perfectly honest with you. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Alex Labbe. As it was announced on Wednesday morning that Alex Labbe will drive the 07 for SS Greenlight Racing this weekend at the Chicago Street Course. I believe this will be Alex Labbe's second or third Xfinity start of the 2024 season. Alex Labbe, of course, I believe has been competing part-time in the Penny Series this year and is also, of course, a Penny Series champion. I think Alex is a really deserving driver to be full-time in the sport. The last time I think he was full-time was 2020 or 2021, if I'm not mistaken. So it's been a few years since he's been full-time. Alex, I think, is going to have a really solid run. He's got some street course racing experience and racing in the Penny Series. I think Alex is going to contend for top 15 and 20. Obviously, it's a very stacked Cup Series field. You got Joe Logano running it. You got Kyle Larson running it. You got Shane Van Gisbergen doing double duty. You've got other drivers like Adrian Allmendinger and Austin Hill doing double duty as well. So it's a very, very stacked field. Nonetheless, I think Alex Bay will have a pretty solid and good run this weekend at the Chicago Street Course. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kenko Mura. As it was announced on Wednesday late morning that Kenko Mura will make his official NASCAR Xfinity Series debut this weekend at the Chicago Street Course, driving the number 53 car for Joey Gase Motorsports. Kenko Mura, for those who don't know, has been competing in the NASCAR Euro Series for the last 2 years. I don't know if he's won a race in that or not. If he has, you can comment that below. But Kenko Mura, I think this is a really interesting pickup for sure. I think with the team he's running for, I think it's going to be very tough for him to make. I know he's got some experience on some street courses, but I think it's going to be very tough to make of how in-depth this field is going to be this weekend. I really hope he can do a good job and prove me wrong and can make the field, because if he can make the field, I think that's really, really exciting. I'm excited to see this opportunity for him. I think it's well-earned and well-deserved in my opinion, and like I said, very happy and glad to see that Kenko Mura will make his NASCAR Xfinity Series debut this weekend at the Chicago Street Course. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Busch. Now, if you watched the late model race that Kyle Busch competed in this past weekend, once again, after restarting in fourth position at the end of the event and charging up to the front, Kyle Busch would spin out with about 25 to 30 laps to go. It seems like there is a bad cloud that is hanging over Kyle Busch right now. Every time Kyle Busch is up front contending for a win or contending for a really strong and great run, something tends to go wrong, unfortunately, for Kyle Busch. I really hope that this bad cloud can get over him, because I feel like if once this bad cloud that's hanging over him can go away, I think Kyle Busch can obviously be a contender for wins. We saw how fast he was at the end of the race in Nashville. They struggled early in the race, but they made that car a lot better, and we're going to a track where he ran quite well, especially at the end of the event. I know he crashed early in the race and ran into tire barriers, among other things, but Kyle Busch, I think, can absolutely turn the corner and finish and get his season turned around really quickly. It's been a rough stretch for Kyle Busch, but if there's anybody that can really turn it around and get going better, it is definitely Kyle Busch. Again, I really hope for Kyle Busch's sake things can turn around for him so he can definitely have a much better season, but right now it seems like things are not going the right direction. Hopefully things can get better for Kyle Busch going forward. We'll see if things can improve for Kyle Busch. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Oli Bman. As it was announced yesterday that Oli Bman will officially join Haas F1 in 2025, driving the number 87. And according to the contract, it is a multi-year deal. Oli Bman is one of the best up-and-coming talents in the lower series currently at the moment. While he's been kind of struggling in Formula 2, he made his F1 debut earlier this year at, I believe it was the second race in Saudi Arabia, and was extremely impressive, finishing inside the top 10, 8th place, when he replaced Carlos Sainz, who I think had appendicitis surgery, if I remember correctly. And he, in my opinion, has been someone who's been highly touted as one of the best up-and-coming talents in the lower ranks. I think Oli Bman is going to surprise a lot of people. I believe he's replacing Nico Hülkenberg going into next season. I think that Oli Bman is going to do a very solid job this year. Haas has shown some decent pace at times. They ran really well in the past weekend, and I think that they're going to have a good chance and opportunity to run quite well again this season. It's a really awesome opportunity. I'm very happy for Oli, and I think he will do a really good job with Haas. My prediction for Oli is that I think he will get a couple points, and I think he'll be competing for points in a majority of races this year, or next year, I should say, and going in the future, because he'll be there also in 2026. We'll see how he ends up doing, and we'll see if Oli Bman can have a fantastic and great run with Haas F1 later this season. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about AJ Allmendinger. As it was announced a couple days ago that AJ Allmendinger will be driving the 13th for Kaulig Racing this weekend at the Chicago Street Course. This means that Kaulig Racing will have 3 entries this weekend at Chicago. We already know Daniel Hemrick is going to be in the 31. We know that SVG is going to be driving the 16 car with Wendy sponsorship. We are expecting that Trackhouse Racing is going to be preparing that seat for SVG, and obviously the big Wendy sponsorship as well. And now we know AJ Allmendinger is going to be driving the 13. I think AJ Allmendinger legit is a very major sleeper pick for the win this weekend. He is a really solid road course racer. He's been up front a lot of these events, and if I remember correctly, didn't he finish in the top 10 at Sonoma in that car? And that wasn't a course prepared by Trackhouse. And he ran really well in this 13 car. If I remember correctly, at COTA, he finished in like 7th or 8th position in a third Kaulig car. I think he is going to have a really good chance and opportunity to compete for the win. I think he can win not only the NASCAR Xfinity Series race, but the Cup Series race as well. It's really cool to see he's getting more experience. I think he'll have a chance to win the Xfinity Series race, and I think he will at least have a good chance and opportunity to get a top 10, if maybe not even a win. We'll see how he ends up doing, but I do think that AJ Allmendinger will have a really good chance and opportunity to have a fantastic run this weekend in the Cup Series race at the Chicago Street Course. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about NY Racing. As it was announced yesterday that NY Racing will be making their official return next weekend at Pocono International Raceway with the number 44 car with JJ Yeley driving behind the wheel. NY Racing has made select starts throughout the 2024 season. They attempted to qualify for the Daytona 500 and unfortunately did not end up making the show. They raced at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. I think they finished many laps, and I think they finished in the garage, and they've ran a couple other races throughout 2024. If I'm not mistaken, in the past, NY Racing has stated they've been interested in wanting to go full-time in the future. Now, what are my expectations for this team? Well, unfortunately, I think they're going to have some sort of electrical issues or problems, and I don't think they're going to be competing for a win, sadly. I would love to see them compete for a win, do not get me wrong, but at the same time, they are not a fast organization. They do get some support from RCR from the engines they receive, but that's pretty much about it. I'm not expecting much of them. I'm not expecting them to set the world on fire. I think they unfortunately are going to end up struggling this weekend, and sadly, I don't expect much of NY Racing. It's a great opportunity, don't get me wrong, for them, and I really hope they can make the best of it. Just like I said, I'm not expecting much of them this weekend. I think they will unfortunately struggle a bit, but it's good to see they're back. Maybe they get someone like Matt DiBenedetto to drive at some point, or Jeffrey Earnhardt. Who knows at this point? Nonetheless, glad to see MI Racing showing up. But at the same token, same time, I'm not really expecting them to set the world on fire. And I think there's some big struggles coming their way overall, to be perfectly honest with you. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Logan Sergeant. Now, it was reported by motorsports.com that it's been officially confirmed that Logan Sergeant is currently in talks to join Prema in IndyCar in 2025. This has been a rumor that's been going on over the course of the last few months, that there have been talks and conversations going on between Prema and Logan Sergeant to join. Obviously, Logan Sergeant currently competes in Formula 1, but let's be real and honest, Logan Sergeant has been struggling a lot this year. And the rumor is, and what I think a lot of his fans really want, is for him to get out of Formula 1 and come over and race in IndyCar, where I think he's going to be loved a lot more in IndyCar than he is going to be loved in Formula 1. It's no secret that Formula 1 does not like American drivers. They've not been a big fan of them. They like American dollars, let's make that clear, but they do not like American drivers. I think Logan Sergeant coming over to IndyCar would do a lot of great things for the sport, and I think he would do a very excellent and solid job with Prema. Prema is expected to be a team that I think is going to be a formidable force. Now, it's unknown at this point who his teammate would end up being. That's not been made clear at the moment right now, but I do think that there will be someone really good working with him as a teammate. I know there have been rumors of Alexander Rossi at one point going over to be his teammate, but Alexander Rossi has denied those rumors according to Jenna Fryer, and I don't think he ends up going there next year too. I think he probably goes to Rahal next year at this point. Still, I like Logan Sergeant. I want to see him come over on IndyCar, and I actually think he'll be a lot more competitive racing IndyCar, especially with a team with like Prema, than racing in Formula 1 where the car matters a lot more. Talent does matter. Granted, it's basically been one of the same organizations the last couple of years, but I do think that Logan Sergeant is going to do a really good job if he truly goes to Prema. I really hope he ends up heading there because I think he will do a great job if he does head over to the Prema organization in 2025. We'll see what ends up happening. We'll see if he officially joins in 2025. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Luke Fenhouse. As it was announced on Wednesday evening that Luke Fenhouse would make more starts with ThorSport Racing in the number 66 truck for ThorSport Racing. He'll run at Pocono next weekend, and then he'll run at Indianapolis Raceway Park the next weekend after that. Luke Fenhouse is one of the best up-and-coming talents in the short track scene and also made his Truck Series debut earlier this year at Worldwide Technology Raceway. He struggled early in that event, ended up spinning out, but recovered, played a really great strategy, and finished inside the top 10 in that event. Luke Fenhouse is a very, very talented driver, and this no disrespect to the guy that's been driving a 6.6 truck, Connor Jones, but Luke Fenhouse in one start impressing more than what Connor Jones has done in that truck the whole entire year. If I'm looking at going into next year, I know Connor Jones brings some sponsorship and funding, but I'm looking going into next year, and Luke can bring a little bit more funding from the Soda Sense group because Soda Sense has been sponsoring all those races. I think that they need to bring Luke Fenhouse in full time. So I think he will be a championship threat and contender if he gets behind the wheel. It's a fantastic opportunity nonetheless, and my expectation is that Luke Fenhouse will contend for a couple top 10s and maybe have a chance at IRP to go to victory lane. That IRP field is going to be stacked, by the way. I think a lot of guys can go out there and win. So I'm very excited for Luke. I think it's a fantastic and a really great opportunity for him. And again, I do think he's going to be able to make the best of it and do a really, really awesome and great job. So once again, very excited for him. Glad to see he is getting the chance and opportunity because I do think that Luke Fenhouse will do an amazing and a really, really great job with this organization. And I think he'll do really good over the next couple weeks with that team. Starting the next couple weeks, I think he'll do a really good job with the ThorSport Racing Group, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Martin Truex Jr. Now, we've talked about this over the last couple weeks. We know Martin Truex Jr. is retiring from full-time NASCAR Cup Series racing at the end of the year. But there's been rumors and speculation, and Martin Truex Jr. has now kind of confirmed those rumors that he is in talks and conversations about maybe running the 2025 Daytona 500 and running a couple NASCAR Xfinity Series and Truck Series races as well. Martin Truex Jr., obviously, it is really great that he is not going to be leaving the sport. He says he's still working on a deal to run the 2025 Daytona 500. And we also already know that he is going to be an ambassador for Joe Gibbs Racing going forward. Now, what teams can Martin Truex Jr. end up running if he is going to run part-time? Well, it's very obvious which Cup Series team he is likely going to end up running with. That is 2311 Racing. 2311 Racing, I expect will have 4 cars in next year's Daytona 500. We do know that Tyler Reddick will be in the 45. Bubba Wallace is expected to be back in the 23 car next year. And in the 67 car, the third one will either be driven by Corey Heim or Riley Hurts. I think the number they end up choosing for him is the number 56. That's a number that's pretty iconic to Mark Truex Jr., though I don't know if the flashbacks of what happened in 2013 could hurt that possibility of happening. But Mark Truex Jr. running the Daytona 500, he wants to win the Daytona 500, and I think it's really exciting to see that he's interested in running the Daytona 500 and probably a couple other races with 2311 Racing as well. Now we go to the NASCAR Xfinity Series. What team would he run for? It's pretty obvious. Joe Gibbs Racing. I think he's basically said this, that he wants to split a ride with his brother Ryan Truex. That's what he wants to do. And I think that him and Ryan splitting a ride together, I think that would lead to a lot of success for both of them. Ryan Truex, obviously, I think is a driver who should be racing full-time in Xfinity currently at the moment. And if you have both Ryan and Mark Truex Jr. working together and trying to get Ryan's a little bit of sponsorship, I think that would be really good for both of them overall. As for the Truck Series, I think most likely what's going to end up happening with the Truck Series program is going to be a Tricon Garage. Tricon is the fastest and the best Truck Series organization out there currently at the moment, and I think Tricon would absolutely be the team that he would end up going with if he wanted to compete with that team. He's obviously won a Truck Series race a couple years ago at Bristol Dirt, and I think he'd be up front contending for wins with that team. Yes, they've got 5 trucks out there, but he probably end up driving the one truck because William Walsh isn't obviously going to be in trucks because he's going to be in Xfinity full-time most likely next year. But going back to racing for 2311, maybe he can have a retirement car for drivers like Carl Edwards, Kurt Busch, or maybe Mark Truex Jr. as well. Probably not, but that would be really cool if that ended up happening. So I'm excited to see that Mark Truex Jr. is committed to NASCAR, isn't leaving NASCAR overall. I think he's going to do a really good job in those select races that he does get to run. And nonetheless, I'm really happy for him, and I'm very glad to see that Mark Truex Jr. isn't leaving NASCAR altogether and will be racing in the sport going forward into the future. I'm glad to see we'll be sticking around and racing with a couple organizations starting in 2025, most likely with 2311. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Josh Berry. Now, we did a video covering this on the channel a couple days ago, but it was officially confirmed on Wednesday morning that Josh Berry will officially join the Wood Brothers starting in 2025, driving the number 21 car. According to reports, this is a multi-year deal. Now, when we had heard the official reports, we all thought that the crew chief was going to be announced, and we all thought that Brian Wilson, who's been the crew chief of the number 21 car the last year and a half, would end up getting the crew chiefing role. But according to John Wood and everyone at the organization, they have not officially announced who the crew chief is going to be for Josh Berry. There is still a chance and possibly that Rodney Childers could follow Josh Berry over. And if Rodney Childers does end up coming over with Josh Berry to the Wood Brothers, I do expect a lot more success than whether that is without Josh Berry. But I also don't think Josh Berry completely needs Rodney Childers. I think Josh Berry is a really good and a fantastic talent. Now, Harrison Burton did release a video, and he was very, very gracious, unlike another driver like Matt Benedetto. He basically thanked everybody for everything, and he's basically focused on finishing out the rest of the year. It was a very classy and a really, really mature interview by a young driver. We'll get to talk about Harrison Burton in just a second. But going to talk about Josh Berry joining the Wood Brothers. I think this is a really, really great move for the Wood Brothers, and I think this is a major, and a pretty massive upgrade for the team and organization. Look, this is no disrespect to Harrison Burton, but Harrison Burton has completely struggled this last couple of years. Since Harrison Burton got on that ride, the best points finish for that 21 car is 27th. And it combined about 100 starts in the NASCAR Cup Series. Harrison Burton has a combined 5 top 10 finishes in a span of 90 or 91 races. Harrison Burton has just not panned out, sadly. It's not really worked out for him. He hasn't done a really great job, and he's just generally struggled throughout his short career. Now, I don't think Harrison Burton is completely out of the sport, but what are my expectations for Josh Berry? My expectations for Josh Berry going to next year is I think he is going to perform a lot better than Harrison Burton, and I think he'll be contending for a top 20 in the points. And I think he'll have an outside chance and opportunity to make the playoffs. If they find a way to somehow get Rodney Childers to be the crew chief, however, I do think that Josh Berry will end up having a really much better chance to make the playoffs. You think about what Josh Berry's been able to do with Rodney Childers so far this year. In the last 7 races, Josh Berry's had 4 top 10 finishes, and a couple top 5s along with that as well. It feels like this Ford team is getting a lot better. I wonder if they're going to bring people in from that SHR number 4 team, or if they're going to basically find all people from Team Penske to work with Josh Berry next year. It sounds like they're going to go after crew chief in the Team Penske group. But I think this is a fantastic, great move for Josh, and I'm excited to see that he will get to join the Wood Brothers in 2025. As for Harrison Burton, I think he heads back down to the NASCAR Xfinity Series. He could run part-time in an organization like Rickware Racing next year. But one of my early predictions for him is I think he'll end up at the Haas factory team. He's got sponsorship funding with him from Dex Imaging, and they're looking for someone with funding. That's what I think Gene Haas told, and Joe Custer told Rick Allen not too long ago. They're looking for sponsorship and funding. And I think that's where he ends up next year. And I think to rebuild your career and go back to Xfinity is not a bad move, honestly. And maybe, just maybe, he finds a career and becomes extremely successful. Being successful in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, there's nothing wrong with that. Some of the best drivers in that series have gone on to be NASCAR Hall of Famers. And I can see Harrison Burton potentially leading that and getting on a team like this and doing an excellent job. I think if he goes to Haas, I think he wins a few races because they're probably going to be the main 4 team in 2025. Again, I'm so excited for Josh Berry. It's a fantastic, amazing, and a really great opportunity. And nonetheless, really happy and glad to see that Josh Berry will officially join the Wood Brothers in 2025. I think he's going to do an amazing and excellent and great job with the team, and I think he'll perform a lot better than what Harrison Burton has done so far with that organization overall, to be honest with you. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the first of 3 major stories in today's episode as we're doing a small little NASCAR silly season update. Now, Bob Pockrass wrote a really good and really strong article a week ago, and he's updated on some of the projections on where he thinks some of the people could end up in 2025. Let's first begin by talking about 2311 Racing. According to Bob Pockrass, it sounds like the Bubbles is really close to signing an extension with 2311 Racing. He's not signed a contract currently at the moment to return to 2311 Racing, but it is expected that he will return to 2311 Racing in 2025 and sign a multi-year contract extension with the team and the organization. 2311 Racing is expected to purchase one of the Stewart Haas Racing charters. Now, it is currently down to 2 drivers for that 3rd seat, Riley Herbst and Corey Heim. Corey Heim is currently the reserve driver for 2311 Racing, but he doesn't bring as much sponsorship or funding as a driver like Riley Herbst. That being said, I think Corey Heim will be my personal choice to go into a 3rd 2311 Racing seat, but because of the monster money, and there's been rumors and speculation that the Herbst family is playing a big role in that 3rd charter going over to 2311, it sounds like Riley Herbst is a major candidate for 2311. Now, Riley did say that he has multiple options in all 3 series going into next year, but I think there's a really good chance he does head over to Toyota and drive the 3rd 2311 Racing seat, but I would personally choose Corey Heim or someone like Kurt Busch to get behind the wheel of that car or seat. Let's transition over and talk about Ford. Noah Gragson has currently 2 teams he's being looked at for 2025. That is Front Row Motorsports and Richard Childress Racing. Until the Haas factory announced that many were believing that he was going to go over to Richard Childress Racing because of the Bassler Shops connection. But now it sounds like Noah Gragson is the lead candidate to take over the 34 car in 2025. Noah Gragson's been really solid this year with Stewart Haas Racing. I wonder if Drew Blickensterber could follow Noah Gragson over to that organization next season. I think Noah Gragson would be an amazing candidate to go with, and Noah, I think, has done a really good job this season. It sounds like he's one of the lead candidates to go over to Front Row Motorsports in 2025. We know Todd Gillen has signed a multi-year extension with the team and organization, but Noah Gragson is a front runner for Front Row, and I think he ends up at one of those organizations next season. Speaking of its current SHR driver, Cole Custer is a current lead driver to take over for the Haas factory team and organization. Obviously, Joe Custer, who is Cole Custer's father, is running the organization next year, and Cole Custer, the lead candidate, take over the seat. Now, the number is unknown and unclear at the moment what they're going to end up doing, but Cole Custer is currently lead candidate to take over this seat in 2025. The other Front Row organization car, there are 2 drivers in the running for that other one. It is Christian Eckes and Sam Mayer. Christian Eckes has been tearing up in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series this past year. He's won 3 races, just had a dominant run in National Super Speedway, and is the only driver really keeping up with Corey Heim in the Truck Series on pure pace and speed. Christian Eckes doesn't bring a lot of funding to the table, however, and I don't know if Chevy wants to lose two of their drivers going into next year, because if they lose both Christian Eck and Sam Mayer, that would not be a great day. Speaking of Sam Mayer, he's the other driver that's potentially headed over to front row next year. Sam Mayer leaving the Chevy camp would definitely be a little shocking, but not surprising. There's a lot of drivers in the Chevy camp that want to move up the Cup, and there really are not a lot of rides in the Chevy camp available. If you got an opportunity to go to Front Row Motorsports, you take that chance and opportunity. And Sam Mayer, unlike Christian Eckes, he does have a little bit more funding than him. So I think that Sam Mayer would be a really excellent candidate, and I think there's a good chance he could end up there as well. Another driver that's been mentioned, however, is Zane Smith. Zane Smith may or may not be returning to Trackhouse, would have likely been Shane Van Gisbergen getting the third seat going into next year. Sam Mayer could potentially go to Zane Smith could potentially go to Colleague Racing next year. Christian Eckes could also go to Colleague Racing next year. But Zane Smith could also go back to front row. That certainly is a possibility. Zane does bring a little bit of sponsorship with him to the table, but some of the sponsors he's had are also Trackhouse Racing sponsors as well. We also get to see AJ Allmendinger go up to Colleague Racing next year full time. Don't count that as a possibility. And Christian Eckes, like I said, could be in the running for that seat. If Sam Mayer moves up to the NASCAR Cup Series, Connor Zilisch, according to what I have heard, is the frontrunner to take over that number 1 car next year. According to reports that Adamson reported last week, currently Connor Zilisch is in negotiations to join Junior Motorsports full-time. Connor's been doing an excellent job in the lower series. He's one of the best racing prodigies out there and will make select starts with Junior Motorsports in the NASCAR Xfinity Series next year. This year with that number 88 car. So Connor Zilisch is the front runner for that 1 car, or the 9 car. Brandon Jones continues to struggle. Speaking of Toyota, let's talk about Eric Jones. Eric Jones has not signed a contract extension with Legacy Motor Club, but it sounds like he might return. But if he does not return to Legacy Motor Club and tries to find a better option like a front row perhaps, Corey Heim would end up taking over the seat. We know the legacy is really high on Corey Heim as well, and he made select starts in the 43 car when Eric Jones was injured. So Corey Heim will be the replacement for Eric Jones. Now let's go over and talk about Rick Ware Racing. Rick Ware Racing does have a couple different options available. Justin Haley has had talks and conversations, what we've heard, with other teams, but it does sound like he is going to return to Rick Ware Racing and continue driving the number 51 car next season. As for Ryan Preece is the only driver currently at the moment that is from SHR that is not expected to be full-time in the NASCAR Cup Series. It sounds like he could be part-time Rick Ware Racing in the 15 car, but more than likely Ryan Preece will end up in the NASCAR Xfinity Series and end up being teammates with Harrison Burton in 2025. It's going to be very interesting to see how the rest of the silly season plays out. There's a lot of topsy-turvies, one of the craziest NASCAR silly seasons we've ever seen, and I think a lot of big moves are happening down the pipeline. We still haven't had Daniel Suarez's contract extension announced as well, though I do think that's not going to be happening too far down the road. We'll see how silly season plays out, and we'll see how everything goes, but there's a lot of big play pieces, and dominoes need to fall, not just in Cup, but also the NASCAR Xfinity Series as well, going forward. And now we're going to jump on to the first of 2 major stories in today's episode as we're talking about Hailie Deegan. Now, we've already kind of talked about this on the channel this past week, but it was announced on Monday, shockingly, that Hailie Deegan would not be driving the 15 car for AM Racing this weekend. Instead, Joey Logano, a 2-time NASCAR Cup Series champion who currently drives a 22 car for Team Penske, will make his first NASCAR Xfinity Series start since all the way back in 2019. And a lot of people have been questioning whether or not Hailie Deegan is going to be back with AM Racing going forward. There's been no official formal announcement in regards to this, her returning or not returning. But there's a couple of very interesting things that have happened. According to what has been reported, it sounds like Hailie Deegan has removed AM Racing from her Twitter bio. Now, some have said on Twitter that she never had AM Racing in her Twitter bio to begin with, which is a little weird if you ask me, especially driving for team organization. Usually you have your team you're driving for in your Twitter or your Instagram bio. Now, she does, from what I understand, so follow all of them on Instagram currently at the moment. Now, obviously, Hailie Deegan has not been doing a really good job this year in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, and I think there's a lot of skepticism when she went into this ride for 2024. Remember, she actually signed a multi-year contract, but when Joey Logano went on Dale Jr. Dallin as well and talked to Dale, he basically said that that ride was opening up. When I hear the words opening up, that tells me a lot. And the other thing that kind of tells me what is going on is that Joey Logano said that Team Penske is not showing any support toward this ride. Obviously, Joey Logano is a way better driver than Hailie Deegan. If Joey Logano outperforms Hailie Deegan in big ways where he finishes, let's say, in the top 5 or top 3, even goes out there and wins, I think that she is completely done with this team altogether. Now, could she return to this team? That certainly is a possibility and shot. I wouldn't be completely shocked or completely surprised. But let's be real and frank here. Hailie Deegan has not done a good job with AM Racing this season. In the 17 starts we've ran in the Xfinity Series this year, Hailie Deegan has a combined 4 top 20 finishes. The previous driver who drove in this seat had 9 top 10 finishes and a top 5. That top 5 coming at the Chicago Street Course. Hailie Deegan is 27th in points, which is last of all full-time drivers. Of course, now she is no longer full-time. And she's also behind drivers that have ran part-time. Eric Almirola, who's currently suspended after a conflict with Bubba Wallace, he's currently ahead of her in the standings. Same with Kyle Sieg, who's only made 14 starts this year. And the most damning thing, Ryan Truex, who's only made 5 or 6 starts this year in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, he's only like 3 or 4 points behind her. And Carson Quaffle, who's only made 5 Xfinity starts this year, he's basically only a few points behind her as well. She has struggled immensely this year. The reason they've taken her out of the car, at least for this weekend, and probably maybe for the rest of the year, is just a lack of performance. They're looking to elevate their program. Look, I like Hailie Deegan a lot. There's no denying that. I've been a big fan of hers. But we have to be real and honest with ourselves. Hailie Deegan, in my opinion, she has been underachieving in the series currently at the moment. And you look at it. And I think Michael Rose brought up a really good point. When she left Toyota to go to Ford, that's when I think things really started going wrong. Because when she was in the ARCA West Series, driving for McEnany Hilgeman, she won 3 races across 2 years and finished in the top 5 in points both years. It was a pretty stacked field back then, too. Then she went to ARCA in 2020 and drove the 4 car. And she did okay, but didn't do absolutely amazing. She got a top 5 or a couple top 5s and some top 10s, but generally was one of the slower cars that was full-time on the track. Then she went to trucks in 2021. She had a pretty bad rookie year. Didn't do awful, but did not have a great rookie season. Then 2022 came around. She didn't improve. She made that one-off Xfinity Star, however, and she did a pretty good job in that event, which is why I think a lot of people had hope that maybe she could do really good if she ran full-time. Then 2023 came around, and she joined Source Sport Racing. I think we all kind of expect her to be a playoff threat. Hailie Deegan finished 19th in the standings and had 2 top 5 finishes. Meanwhile, her teammates went on to win. One of the guys went on to win the championship, though it was very controversial. And I believe Ty Majeski also made the Final Four that year as well for the championship. Hailie Deegan and then she went to Xfinity, took over the number 15, which was originally the 25 car, and she just hasn't panned out. I had heard that there were talks that there was going to be 2 cars this year. I think that a veteran teammate would really have helped her and would have guided her, to be honest, because I think that would have put her in a better position. But AM Racing's been having some funding issues. Look, let's keep it real and honest here. That car is not a championship caliber car. I think we all know that. That being said, if you're in a car like AM Racing, you should be performing a lot better. And the fact that Hailie Deegan has not been performing is just unfortunate. And I think her career in NASCAR could be in jeopardy, to be honest. Now, do I think Hailie Deegan will still be in the sport altogether? Yes. I think what she should do is focus on honing in her craft and getting better. But seeing her out of the car is definitely unfortunate. But again, when you perform not as good as she's been doing, if you perform as bad as she's been doing, you eventually are going to lose your opportunity. Now, the sponsors might be frustrated, but we know that I think if the company that's sponsoring Airbox or whatever company sponsoring, they're not mad about her not being in the car. Tells you a lot you need to know. They're probably not happy with the performance that she's been putting on. She really needs to turn the corner. She needs to get better. She hasn't performed. She struggled immensely. We talked about it a few weeks ago in New Hampshire. I think the excuses are done. She's got to do better, and she just isn't doing that, unfortunately. She's not been running well, and I think her future in NASCAR, unfortunately, is very uncertain. I would not be surprised or shocked if Hailie Deegan is completely out of the sport or just part-time going forward. Maybe going back to the truck series. I think she, unfortunately, is done with AM Racing, to be honest with you. And now we're going to head on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about Shane Van Gisbergen. Now, I kind of touched on this in the small silly season update I did earlier in this episode. But it sounds like Shane Van Gisbergen is one of the lead candidates to take over the 3rd full-time trackhouse seat in 2025. Now, very recently, SVG did an interview with Dustin Albino of NASCAR.com and JSki.com as well. And Shaman Gisbergen spoke about his transition over to racing in NASCAR. Obviously, it's been about a year now since he won in his debut at the Chicago Street Course, which is super impressive, and it led to this really awesome and great opportunity with Trackhouse Racing to get a development contract and deal. Now, SVG in that article kind of confirmed and says that he is hoping to join the Cup Series full-time in 2025 with Trackhouse Racing. He said, "That's why I came to America. I wanted to race full-time in the NASCAR Cup Series." Shaman Gisbergen has been very solid so far in the 2024 season. So far in the 17 NASCAR Xfinity Series races we've ran, I believe, he has finished in the top 15 double-digit times 10. And he's had 4 top 10 finishes along with 2 race wins. But they're at a type of track where he has been extremely solid and really, really good at. We know he's a fantastic road course racer. He's one of the best road course racers in the field, and he probably also should have won at Circuit Americas as well. Had he won that COTA race, he'd be the winningest driver currently in NASCAR Xfinity competition, which I don't think a lot of us expected. But the other big thing for me with SVG is he's also gotten better and improved a lot on ovals. And I think that's why he deserves his chance and opportunity, if he is given the chance and opportunity nonetheless to go full time. Now, obviously, where does he end up in 2025? Like I've already mentioned and said, it sounds very likely that if he does go Cup Series racing full-time next year, it is going to be with Trackhouse Racing. Trackhouse Racing is a team that's looking to have 3 cars. They are expected to purchase one of the Stewart-Haas Racing charters and be a 3-car team. We know Ross has a multi-year contract currently with Trackhouse Racing, and Daniel Suarez, while now the contract has not been finalized at this particular moment in point, Daniel Suarez is also expected to return to Trackhouse Racing in 2025. Now, the big thing is that SVG also brings sponsorship funding as well. Red Bull has an entitlement deal with him. WeatherTech is sponsored, which are also expected to sponsor Connor Zillage if Connor Zillage does end up going full-time with Junior Motorsports next season. And I think there's a lot of big moves on the way for this team as well. As for SVG, the big thing we need to continue seeing improvement on is ovals. And I think the big question will be, when will it be announced? To be honest with you, I think we're all kind of waiting for the charter agreement to get done for SVG to go full-time next year. He is not going to go to Call Racing. He'll be in a Trackhouse Racing seat if he does end up going full-time. And look, in my personal opinion, if you're looking at the choose between SVG and Zane Smith, I think Shaman Gisbergen is 100% the guy you do have to go with. Shaman Gisbergen, in my opinion, is a more talented overall driver. Zane is, in my opinion, probably a better oval racer, but all around SVG is a driver that you need to go with. Look, you just have to win one race with this playoff format and contend. And I think that if you go to Cup, he will get the chance and opportunity to develop a lot quicker and way more better than what we've seen in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. And again, he's been improving in Xfinity. Say what you want to say, his oval craft has gotten better. He ran top 15 a majority of that event at National, one of the better runs I've seen him have. And he finished, I think, at 14th or 15th in that race. And I think that as he gets more experience in the NASCAR Xfinity Series on those types of tracks, the ovals, I think he's only going to get better. So the question I have is, if he does go full-time Cup Series racing next year, what would the expectations be? I think he wins a race or two next year in Cup. That's kind of bold, I know, because Trackhouse hasn't had the overall pace or speed, but he's a really solid road course racer. We know he's going to be a contender at Chicago if we do go back to Chicago, because it's unclear and unknown at this point if the Chicago Street Course is going to come back in 2025 at this moment. But I think a lot of us would love to see the Chicago Street Course be able to make a comeback next year. But at the same token, at the same time, if it doesn't come back, I still think he wins a couple road course races like Sonoma, which he won in Xfinity. He's been really solid this year. And again, I think he's earned the opportunity and the right to move up full-time the Cup next year. Now, the question will be, when will it be announced? Honestly, I don't know. It's been a lot of silly season movement happening, and there's a lot of big moves coming down the pipeline from Motorsports. They're expecting to make an announcement on their driver lineup in the future. And I also think that if he does go full-time, I still think you're going to see him part-time in Xfinity to get a little more experience. But also, I think he needs to be in a next-gen car. He wants to be Cup racing next year. And again, like I've already mentioned and said, I think Shaman Gisbergen will be in the Cup Series next season. And I think he's earned the opportunity and the right to move up to the Cup Series full-time. And I think he will get that chance. He brings sponsorship funding with him. He's a driver that I've respected for a very long time. And I think many of you are going to be respecting next year if he truly does get the chance and opportunity to move up. But like I've already mentioned and said here on this channel, I do think that Shane Van Gisbergen is going to move up, and he could have a really good opportunity at a really strong rookie class. He could have teammates like Sam Mayer, not teammates, but could be going against drivers like Sam Mayer and Christian Eckes and Riley Hurts and even Corey Heim. We could have one of the most stacked rookie fields we've ever seen. And honestly, I'm here for it. I want to see a stacked rookie field. I want to see a stacked rookie class. And I want to see a lot of drivers competing for the Rookie of the Year honors. But again, like I've already mentioned and said, I do believe that Shane Van Gisbergen will move out to the NASCAR Cup Series and drive for the organization Trackhouse Racing next year. I think it gets announced at some point. There's apparently like a press conference, something later today. If something gets announced there, we'll talk about it here on the channel. But it sounds like SVG could be moving up to the NASCAR Cup Series in the not-so-distant future. So, that is going to be today's breaking news or NASCAR news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support on Patreon as well. List description below that, and comment your thoughts below on today's video. Do you think Shane Van Gisbergen moves up next year or not? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And do you think Hailie Deegan is actually out of AM Racing? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I don't think there's any more videos dropping here on the channel live today. Tomorrow on the channel, we're going to have reactions to Cup Series qualifying. We're going to have, of course, reactions to the NASCAR Xfinity race. If Shane Van Gisbergen wins that race, we'll talk about that as well. We're also going to have reactions to the Cup race. We'll have an SVG video dropping if he doesn't win that race. And we got a lot of great content dropping as we head to Pocono. And there's some big silly season news down the pipeline as we also get you closer to the playoffs as well. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.